You know, we've all grown up with this story, haven't we? The classic American dream, that image of owning your own home, maybe that white picket fence. It's sold as this ultimate symbol of success, of stability, like you've finally made it.
Right. It's a really deeply ingrained belief, a
Yeah,
romantic ideal almost.
exactly. But what if that dream, that ideal, actually clashes pretty hard with, well, with reality, a reality we can actually quantify?
Hmm.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to unpack some honestly surprising truths about owning a home. Our mission isn't just to list facts, but to pull out the really crucial insights from a hard look at the hidden downsides. We want to understand why so many people who buy a house end up secretly regretting it.
Think of it as a shortcut to getting properly informed on, let's face it, one of the biggest decisions most people make.
And we're not going to pull any punches with our main point here. Owning a home isn't automatically the best financial move or even the most rewarding one for everyone. The numbers are actually pretty stark. Something
Mhm.
like 70% of new homeowners say they have regrets.
Yeah, 70%. And that's not just, minor buyer's remorse.
No, it seems much deeper, driven by things like hidden costs, the financial pressure, losing flexibility, and also just feeling pressured by society to buy. This is where it gets really interesting.
It really does.
Okay, so let's unpack that 70% regret number first. I mean, that just sounds massive, doesn't it? It feels counterintuitive to everything we usually hear.
It is striking.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is how widespread it is. Digging a bit deeper, the data shows 82% of recent buyers have at least one specific regret about their purchase. 82%.
Wow.
So it really makes you ask, okay, why? Why are so many people feeling this way, this disconnect between the dream and what actually happens?
And when you look at those specific regrets, what bubbles up to the top? I'm guessing money's a big part of it.
You're absolutely right. Financial struggles are like right there at the forefront. Think about this. 44%, nearly half of new homeowners took on more debt just to maintain their lifestyle after buying.
Just to keep things going.
Yeah. And 43% are struggling just to make the mortgage payments themselves. A big piece of this seems to be underestimating just how difficult the whole home buying process is,
Yeah.
combined with, being surprised by how high interest rates have become and how little there is to choose from, the low inventory.
You mentioned the high interest rates. Can you maybe give us a concrete example? Like, how does that actually hit someone's wallet each month?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
those percentages can feel a bit abstract.
Sure. Let's connect it to the bigger picture. Just a few years back, the average 30-year fixed mortgage was maybe around 3.5%.
Sure.
Now, we're talking 6%, maybe 7%.
Big jump.
Huge jump. So take a, say, $500,000 loan. That difference in rate, it can easily mean paying over $1,000 more every single month.
$1,000. Ouch!
Exactly. So people underestimated how much more they'd be shelling out over the life of the loan. And that constant financial strain, month after month, becomes a huge source of that regret we're talking about.
Okay, so the mortgage payment itself is a big shock for many. But what about the other money surprises? The stuff beyond the main loan payment that catches homeowners off guard?
Right. This is where you really start to see the true cost of ownership.
Mm.
When you peel back the layers, homeowners are facing, on average, over $21,000 a year in these ongoing, often hidden costs.
Wait, $21,000 a year? That sounds enormous. What makes up that number?
Well, a big piece is just maintenance. We're talking an average of $8,808 annually just for upkeep and repairs.
8 grand on maintenance.
Yeah. And many families, they don't budget that
Right.
recommended 1 to 3% of the home's value each year for this stuff. So when something breaks, and things always break, they're financially stretched.
Right. It's not just a dripping tap. It could be the furnace, the roof.
Exactly. Big ticket items. In fact, data shows 29% of homeowners point to unplanned repairs as a major source of stress. But beyond maintenance, you've also got like utilities and energy averaging around $4,500. Property taxes, another $4,300 or so. Home insurance, maybe $2,300. Even internet and cable adds up, about $1,500
And these aren't one-offs. They come around every year.
every single year. They're recurring, often underestimated, and they just quietly add up, draining your budget.
Okay, so the money side is huge. But ownership imposes other kinds of costs too, doesn't it? Like, what does being tied to a house mean for someone's life choices, their flexibility?
That's a really important point and often overlooked. What's fascinating here is how much homeownership limits your flexibility. Buying a house really does root you in one spot. It's an anchor.
Sometimes good, sometimes heavy.
Exactly, sometimes weighing you down. So let's say a fantastic job offer comes up, but it's in another city, another state, Or maybe a family situation changes and you need to move closer. Suddenly, moving isn't just packing boxes.
No, it's a whole production.
It becomes this huge logistical and financial headache. You got to sell the house or maybe try to rent it out. And that whole process can take months, sometimes longer.
Stressful.
Very. And that lack of flexibility, it's not just inconvenient. For many people, especially, say, younger professionals or couples where both partners have careers, it can be a direct barrier to opportunity, a trade-off between your career, maybe personal goals, and the house.
We've also been told for, well, forever, that real estate is just always a good investment, a safe bet. Does that still hold water, especially when you stack it up against other options?
Right. This connects to the whole idea of like financial optimization.
Mm.
Is owning a home the best place for your money to grow? Now, sure, some homes in specific high growth areas have seen amazing appreciation. We all hear those stories.
Mm-hmm. But
But generally, if you look at the broad trends, real estate appreciation actually tends to lag behind the stock market. For instance, real estate typically sees maybe a 5.5% average annual return, whereas the stock market, if you look at something like the S&P 500, that's a benchmark for large U.S. companies, it averages closer to 8 to 10% annually over the long term.
can you give us another example, maybe? Like, put some real numbers on that difference. Because a few percentage points might not sound huge, but over time.
Oh, it adds up significantly.
Yeah.
Consider this. Let's say you invested $1 million in a house back in the year 2000. Today, maybe it's worth around $2.9 million. That sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, decent return.
But if you had put that same $1 million into an S&P 500 index fund back in 2000, today it could be worth over $6 million.
Wow, okay. That's more than double.
Exactly. So it really forces you to ask that question. Is real estate always the best engine for wealth growth? Especially if optimizing your finances is a key goal. And there's another factor. Real estate is illiquid.
Meaning hard to turn back into cash quickly.
Right. You can't just click a button and sell your house like you can with stocks. You can't panic sell if you need the money or the market turns. The process itself, finding a buyer, closing, usually forces you into holding it long term, whether that's your plan or not.
So if you're really focused on the pure financial side.
If you're optimizing purely financially, the math often shows that renting and then diligently investing the money you save on mortgage interest, property taxes, maintenance, all that often comes out ahead.
Which is a powerful argument for renting, especially if you actually do invest that difference. But what about the counter arguments? Like people will say rents always go up or that owning forces you to save through equity. How do those fit in?
Those are definitely important points, part of the traditional thinking. And yes, rents can rise, but often the total cost of owning, when you add up all those hidden expenses, the interest, the taxes, the repairs, that total cost can actually rise faster than rent, especially in the first several years you own the home. And as for forced savings, yes, building home equity is a form of savings, but it's illiquid savings tied up in the property. Investing the difference offers potentially higher returns and liquid savings money you can access more easily if you need it. It gives you more control. The key, though, is discipline. You have to actually invest the difference if you rent.
That leads us right into this kind of surprising counter-narrative we're hearing more. Could renting actually be the smarter financial play for a lot of people?
Well, what's often really eye-opening is when you do a true apples-to-apples comparison of the full monthly cost. So you take owning factor and the mortgage principal and interest, sure, but also the property taxes, the insurance, a realistic budget for maintenance, maybe even utilities, depending on the comparison.
All those things we talked about adding up to that $21K a year.
Exactly. So for a median price, say, two-bedroom home, that true monthly cost of owning might be around $3,600 in many areas. Now, compare that to renting a similar place. In many cities, even expensive ones like San Francisco or New York, the rent for a comparable unit is often less than that $3,600 figure.
So if you look at it purely from a monthly cash flow perspective.
Renting can often leave you with more disposable income each month, and that opens up possibilities.
Right. So what does that mean overall for someone's financial health? Their sense of freedom, maybe?
Well, the data really pushes back against that old idea that renting is just throwing money away. For many people, it's actually a strategic financial choice. It can mean more cash on hand, the ability to invest that surplus potentially more effectively than home equity grows, and just way more financial flexibility.
What's being tied down?
Exactly. It challenges the assumption. Renting can be about maximizing your financial power to build wealth in other ways, often ways that offer better returns and don't lock you into one location or one asset.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the numbers, the finances, but there's this other really powerful layer too, isn't there? The psychological side, the social pressure around homeownership. It feels almost baked into our culture.
Absolutely. And that raises a really important question. How much are our big life decisions, like buying a house, driven by things that have nothing to do with pure finance?
A lot, I suspect.
Definitely. There's this cultural glorification of owning a home. It can lead people to, defend choices that might not be great financially or avoid downsizing even when they're clearly stressed by the costs or upkeep. There's even this feeling some people have that you're somehow less adult or less successful if you rent.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And people often make these huge housing decisions based on emotion, not logic. Generational pressure is a big one too. Well, my parents own a house, so I should too.
Hmm.
It's this powerful story we tell ourselves as a society, and it often overrides a clear look at personal finances and lifestyle needs.
And that's a really hard cycle to break, isn't it? We hear renting is throwing money away so often, and if your family all own homes, there's this sort of unspoken expectation. How do people even start to separate that emotional baggage from the financial facts?
It honestly takes a conscious effort. You have to step back and really ask yourself, am I making this choice because it's truly right for me, my finances, my lifestyle, my goals? Or am I just checking a box that society says I should check?
Yeah.
Hopefully, laying out the numbers like we're doing today gives people some tools, some perspective to have that internal conversation more clearly.
Okay, one last hidden cost area that seems to trip up a lot of homeowners: renovations. They always seem to start small.
Oh, definitely. It's amazing how often renovations turn into these unexpected debt traps. The data's pretty clear here, too. Something like 35% of homeowners plan to spend $10,000 or more every year on renovations.
10 grand a year. Wow.
And maybe even more concerning, about 25% admit they've started renovation projects they knew they couldn't really afford.
Yeah.
It often starts innocently, right? A new coat of paint, maybe update the bathroom fixtures, but then it could just balloon. You make impulsive decisions, or you open up a wall and find unexpected problems, faulty wiring, plumbing issues, mold.
The dreaded scope creep.
Exactly. And suddenly, that small project becomes a massive expense. Materials cost more than expected, labor costs more, and before you know it, people are taking out loans, often high-interest ones, just to finish the job. It adds this whole other layer of financial stress they just didn't see coming.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The high rates of regret, the hidden costs, the loss of flexibility, the investment reality, the pressure. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Maybe you're dreaming of buying, maybe you already own, and some of this sounds painfully familiar.
Yeah, I think if we connect it all back to the bigger picture, the main takeaway isn't that homeownership is inherently bad. It's not about saying never buy a house.
Right.
But it's absolutely crucial to understand that it's not the automatic financial win or the guaranteed path to happiness that it's often made out to be. This deep dive really shows that for a significant number of people, renting can actually make more financial sense.
Especially if it frees up money for better investments.
Exactly. Or gives you more mobility, or just reduces financial stress and gives you more peace of mind. The true cost of owning a home goes so far beyond that initial down payment and the monthly mortgage. It's a whole package deal of financial and personal trade-offs you need to be aware of.
So ultimately, the advice seems to be pragmatic, be driven by data, by your own situation, not by cultural pressure or just emotion when you're making these huge decisions about where you live and how you manage your money.
Precisely.
That American dream might look very different from person to person, and for many, maybe renting and investing is the smarter path to their version of success and stability. That picket fence might just be, well, a bit of a mirage for some.
Well put.
So thinking about everything we've discussed, the hidden costs, the regrets, the financial comparisons, the pressures, here's something to chew on. What's one assumption you've personally held about buying versus renting that maybe you're now willing to re-examine? Armed with this data, how might you approach your next housing decision just a little bit differently?